Hi everyone. In today's video, we're going to talk about how to get started with your first construction project. Coming up. Hi everyone, this is Ernesto from Attaboy Cowboy, and on this channel we give you health and wealth tips to help you be more successful. Now I want to share some tips with you on how to get started on your first construction project. Now this is one of our first, and it wasn't necessarily our most successful. It took us 4 years to get started. Other than that, it's been very successful, but 4 years, and we basically tried to take on the project on our own, be our own general contractor. Now, let me give you some of the reasons why you might want to do that. Initially, we're going to build this project, and it was going to be like 6 feet from the building you see behind us. And there's a lot of things you got to learn. I mean, there's a lot of research. You got to go to the city. It's not difficult at all. Anybody can do it. But you just got to spend a little time. You got to talk to the inspectors. You got to go downtown, talk to building and safety. Get some tips from them. They're really cool. They'll help you out. They'll give you information. We had an inspector come out, and she told us, hey, this is a commercial project because you're within 10 feet of the building. I said, okay. So because of that, you have to get commercial contractors to do your plumbing, your electrical, I mean, everything. So I priced it all out. I called, I got bids for everything. I was looking at about $400,000 to $500,000. That's a lot of money. It's way over what we had expected to spend. So I asked her some questions, and she said, look, if you separate it 10 feet, which was only like, I think I needed like 4 more feet. She goes, then it's just a residential project because it's a duplex. And that means that you don't have to get a licensed contractor for pretty much anything. You can do it all yourself. And I thought, wow, that'd be cool. Then I could just hire like subcontractors. Remember, a lot of the people that you hire in construction are not licensed contractors. Okay, licensed contractors, you might have one, and you might have like 100 different workers that do all the work for him. So you could actually hire those guys. They start their own companies. They can do foundations, they can do electrical, they can do plumbing, they can do framing, they can do stucco, they can do all that stuff. And the quality of the work is just the same. Of course, you have to go through and you have to do some, look at some of their references, look at some of the work they've done, et cetera, talk to them. You can look at my other video I mentioned on how to negotiate with contractors to make sure you're hiring someone that knows what they're doing, but it's really not that difficult. So we just changed the plans. We cut 4 feet off the building, and we basically just made it taller to make up for it. Not that that would increase the square footage, but from that, just changing those 4 feet, the cost dropped from about $400,000 to $500,000 to right around $200,000. So it wasn't going to change. It was still going to be two bedrooms. It's going to save about $300,000. So now we hired a licensed contractor to make the foundation and do the framing, just because the guy gave us a really good deal, better than what we could have found with the other guys we were asking with. So, and he seemed very professional. He seemed like he knew what he was doing. He had a lot of work. He was great. So we chose him. Now, some of the things you're going to run into is, like, we just had this empty dirt lot here. It was our yard. And we were like, okay, so how do we get started? Well, you can either hire an architect or you can hire a designer. A designer basically makes all the plans and meets with the different engineers, structural engineer, the soil engineer, the geologist, all these different people. And basically, he's kind of like the general contractor. He gets together all the people you need to make your project happen. So we went that route. We were going to go with an architect, but he was about $10,000 more. And basically, it's the same thing. It all has to go to the city. They have to review it over and over and over, and they have to approve it. In hindsight, maybe if we would have went with an architect, and maybe it wouldn't have lasted 4 years. But that's something to think about. The thing is that where we live, this place is in downtown Los Angeles. And downtown Los Angeles used to be all oil wells, hundreds of them. And then after they stopped pumping all that oil, they built all the skyscrapers, in downtown LA. The problem is in those days, they weren't very careful, so they dropped oil everywhere. That oil is decaying in the soil and it creates methane. So if you build a building over it and you don't make proper venting, that methane can turn into a bomb and explode, blow up your whole building, you know, and it's not good to breathe. So that caused the cost to go up quite a bit, and it changed the planning. So we had to get a geologist, which ended up probably costing about $25,000 to do like 3 different studies on the soil. And that's what took a long time, actually, the delays. There's actually a famous high school here, the Roy Ball High School here in downtown LA. I think it was one of the most expensive schools in US history. They started it and then they stopped it for like 15 years just because all the methane that's underneath. At the end of the day, it's nothing complicated. Basically, the bottom of the building is, we made it so that it was the most economical, but that we met the city's needs. The dirt you see behind me here is gonna have a thick plastic on it called a methane barrier. And then the whole bottom floor is just gonna be parking, like a huge garage, like 7 cars or something. That's so that it doesn't go into like a living space, but if it does get to the barrier, it'll just go into a garage and then vent out. And then in the garage, we're gonna have to put methane alarms, and those aren't expensive at all. They're like smoke alarms, but they're a little bit more. They're like $100. Those will go off if methane starts leaching into the building. You know, let everybody know, hey, there's methane. But there's nowhere for it to get trapped, basically. So it's just gonna escape into the air and cause more global warming, just like the cows do. But anyway, the other 2 floors are gonna be habitable space. It's gonna be 3 floors. So as we were going through this, we started digging the floor. These are called footings, these big trenches here. They're about, they're pretty deep. I'd say they're about 5 feet deep, and they're full of rebar. And this is basically the skeleton of what's gonna be the footings for the building. Now, we only had to go down about 3 feet, but the inspector came by from the city and he saw pieces of brick in the dirt, which means that it's disturbed soil. At some point over the last 100 years, something was done on this property, and it's not solid dirt, basically. It can shift. And remember, in Los Angeles, this is earthquake country, so that's a big deal. So we called the soil engineer. He said, yeah, this is disturbed soil. You could either remove the top layer of the dirt, 2 feet, which would probably cost about $20,000. We had to remove a lot of dirt, and dirt is expensive to move. We have some containers. I'll show you some pictures of containers. I started filling these up for exercise, but yeah, moving dirt is expensive. So we asked them, what's the other alternative? They said, well, you can go deeper. So we dug down another 2 feet. Instead of 3 feet, we're gonna have 5 feet for our footings. That's gonna make the building way more secure. And the inspector liked that. See, the inspectors, the city, they're like your friends. You gotta work with them. We're gonna be working with that guy for the remainder of this project. So it took 4 years to get to this point, but to actually build the building is gonna be pretty quick, which is probably like, I'd say 6 months, and that's because I'm new and we're going kind of slow, but I think someone that knew what they were doing could probably knock this out in like 3 months or something, probably half the time. Now, we're helping out with some other projects, and those are going much faster because we learned so much from here. The inspectors want everything organized. They want us to have a table set up. You gotta have all your plans ready for them when they show up. You gotta be ready to go. They want you to maintain the outside of the property immaculate. They don't want dirt, you know, on the sidewalk and all that. They can give you a $10,000 fine if there's dirt out on the street, because when it rains, that stuff will go into the sewage and it'll block all the pipes and stuff. They don't want that. Now, basically, when you do it yourself, you're kind of like the general contractor. So instead of spending $500, it's gonna cost us around $200. But we gotta do some work. We have the contractor doing the foundation. We did labor only. As I mentioned in my other video, it's best if you do labor and you buy the materials, because some of the places that he recommended were actually like 50% higher than what I would pay at some of the, like Home Depot or somewhere like that. You really got to price out the materials. You're going to be buying a lot of stuff, a lot of materials. We haven't even really get started. We just bought the rebar and some of the specialty items you need from foundations. And we're already in about the $15,000 range. And I easily could have spent about $25,000 if I hadn't shopped around for that. So basically saved about $10,000. Now, you got to shop around for materials. you're gonna need a lot of subcontractors. You gotta shop around. The electrician, the plumber, the guy that's gonna do the stucco, you know, all these people, you gotta shop around for them. Now, a big thing with when you're doing construction, which I was not aware of, is the foundation. This is by far the most difficult part. And I'm so happy because today they're gonna put mud in the hole, they call it. They're gonna bring cement. And this took the longest. This took about 3 months because no one wants to get in trouble. There's so much liability. People sue so much in the United States. You know, you could be off by ½ an inch and the neighbor could say, hey, you're too close to my building. They pay for a surveyor. They come check and they say, yup, you're off by ½ inch. You're a ½ inch too close to your neighbor. They could sue you, make you move your building, or you'll probably end up, they could request that you do that. You'll end up going to court and settling, and it could cost you a lot of money, hundreds of thousands. So the city inspector comes out and he checked several times. He wanted us to have the lines, basically like a string to show where everything goes. We had a surveyor come out. That's a good job. If anybody's looking for a new job or a profession, surveyors, they charge us about $1,200. And they came out for like about an hour, maybe a little more. And they made, basically they marked the territory, where our property line is and the neighbor's property line. And then they told us where we could build. So they came out, they marked everything. We made the footings, put in all the rebar. Then the inspector said, okay, I want you to call a deputy inspector. That's a guy that's trained by the city that basically is an assistant to the city inspector. He comes out, he does a thorough investigation of the work, tells you what you need to fix, and then gives you a report. He gives you that report, then you call the city inspector, then he looks at that and he says, okay, now I had 2 eyes look at this, but it also passes the responsibility onto that guy because the city doesn't want to get sued. So then the inspector comes and looks over and see if he sees anything wrong. And he says, okay, I want you to call the structural engineer. We had to call the structural engineer to come out. He's gonna come out certain points of the construction just to re-verify we're doing things correctly. He came out, he re-verified how we did everything. He cost us $350. He comes out and takes a look for about 5 minutes. The deputy inspector, same thing, about 5-10 minutes. He charges $250, depending on what he's reviewing. Today, we're gonna pour the concrete. The deputy inspector is going to be here. He's going to charge $370 because he has to be here for about 2 hours while they pour the 4,000 PSI concrete. Now, there's different strengths of concrete. The city requires that an inspector be on site to watch you pour that concrete if it's 2,500 and up. So basically 2,600 and up. 2,500 and below PSI, which is not as strong, they don't have to be here. So he's going to be here to watch. He's just gonna stand here while we pour concrete and he's gonna get paid $370. Again, that passes the responsibility from the city inspector to the deputy inspector. And then by getting the structural engineer involved, it passes it on to him. Then we had to call the surveyor out again to re-verify all the lines, another $800 to check to make sure we were building in the right place. He staked everything out. They call it construction stakes. So there's a lot of verification, re-verification, which is actually a really good thing. At first I was thinking, wow, nobody wants to take responsibility for this. I thought my contractor was kind of like not trying to take responsibility, but no, now that I see, I totally understand, because just in this process, you're gonna get this. A lot of your neighbors are gonna be calling the city on you and the health department, all these people. You know, we don't necessarily have any issues with our neighbors, but nobody wants more neighbors. Everybody wants to live in a low population area. Nobody likes noise. Basically, nobody likes construction, but we all like houses to live in. So they're not going to help you out. So try to keep everything clean. Try to keep the noise down. You know, don't play loud music. Do things that are going to make your neighbors happy. If you know some of them, you know, maybe bake a cake and take an apple pie or a cake or something to each of them to keep the peace so they don't keep calling the inspectors on you. And they're going to call. They've already called dozens of times on us, and the inspector kind of blows them off because he knows a lot of it's not true. But he does check, and he has told me, hey, you know, make sure you're not doing this or that, no noise, no trash, or you're gonna have problems. I'm gonna have to shut you down. They can actually shut you down if you're not doing things properly. So we've had to negotiate the prices for the materials, the subcontractors, everything. And now today we're here at the pour. So I'll keep updating you on how this project's going. And if you have any questions, please comment so I can answer them, because there's a lot of things we went through over the last 2 months, and I don't know if I'm remembering everything, but basically the bottom line is you're gonna have to work with a lot of people. You're gonna have to have good relationships with all these inspectors, engineers, your contractors, all the employees, everybody. So, you know, just be cool. Don't lose your cool, because it could be stressful, a lot of money getting spent. I know right now we're having the fires here in California, and because of that, there's a shortage of materials. So I checked the concrete, and the concrete literally tripled in price. It was like $700 a truck. You know, the big cement trucks, which have 10 yards, we're gonna pay triple. We're gonna pay about $12,000 for concrete today, when it should have been about $4,000. Nothing you can do about it unless we wanna wait a few months, and that's not gonna help because of all the buildings that burn. There's a concrete shortage in California. I'm lucky that I found concrete today. I had to call all around and some of them were telling me they could only give me partial order. So there's a lot of variables that come into play, and wood, because of the fires again and all the homes that burned, it doubled. And I think it's probably gonna go up even higher over the next few weeks, because the fires are going on right now. There's more than 20 in California, and there's a lot of homes, hundreds, probably in the thousands that burned already. So it's gonna create huge demand for workers, for concrete, for wood. So we're actually at a really good time to get this thing done before all that happens. Oh, one last thing I wanna mention is the weather. You know, in Southern California, we don't get a lot of rain, unfortunately. And, you know, we're already in September. I gotta hurry up because we're gonna start getting rain in about November. So we need to hurry up and get this wood done and then get a roof on it. And then if we can get the roof done in time, then we can get all the drywall and all that kind of stuff done, because it's gonna be indoors. So we're in a race right now to get the framing done, get the roof on this thing so that we can keep working. Otherwise, we're gonna have to take a lot of time off when it starts raining. So think about the timing of the year. Don't start obviously during rainy season. Otherwise, all this work you did digging these holes, those holes will collapse. And it actually did happen to us in the spring when we started. So you gotta be mindful of rain. If you live somewhere where there's rain, you're gonna have to use plastic tarps to cover everything up so it doesn't destroy all your work, all your digging. A lot of this work is done by hand. You have to do it with a pickaxe and a shovel and a bucket. So you definitely don't wanna have to be doing that twice. Okay, so I'm gonna give you a quick tour of what this looks like. It looks very simple, but it's very, very involved. Now these trenches go down about 5 feet, and there's 2 different grades of rebar. You can see there's like a skinny one and like a thicker one. And then the rebar cannot touch the sides of the walls. It has to be at least 3 inches off. So the trench is about 5 feet deep, but the rebar cannot touch the sides and it cannot touch the ground. So on the bottom, you'll see these little pieces of concrete. Those are called doughboys. Those are put underneath the concrete, and everything's wired together. You see the wiring? It's metal wire. That's how it keeps the wire together, and it keeps the rebar together, and it keeps this whole structure in place. And then you got these like forms here. You see these pieces of wood? This is all going to be used today when they pour the concrete. What's going to happen there is in this middle section here where this gentleman is, after they fill these trenches here with concrete, the footings, and that dries, this is going to be a concrete slab here, all that area there. And these rebars that you see sticking out there up from the wood, that metal's called rebar. They're gonna finish bridging that rebar across, and all that's gonna be a slab of concrete. So there's a lot of these little parts that are on here, and it all has to go according to what the plans say. Now the plumber came out and he put the pipes for the plumbing here, as you can see. So all this is all set up already. And then there's these big metal rods here. See that? All this stuff is in the plans. And these guys are working really hard. It's been pretty warm here this summer. You can see how meticulous everything has to be. It has to be perfect. He's tying everything together, just making sure everything's ready. And they've been working on this for months. And today, the concrete's coming, and they're gonna pour 7 trucks full. So they don't want this stuff to go, you know, when the concrete comes, it's really heavy. And we've poured concrete before. You have to make sure everything's secure and everything's properly set up. Otherwise, that concrete will go all over the place. And it could make a big mess. And you lose a lot of money. And then you have to clean it up. Remember, that stuff turns hard. So you don't want that to happen. You don't want to make a big mess with concrete. It's really hard to deal with once it hardens. So the concrete truck's gonna come out today, and he's gonna drive up his truck, and another guy's gonna pull up, called a pumper. He costs about $700, and he's gonna pump the concrete with this big hose so that it gets out to these trenches here. Because when you see those concrete trucks, it can only they have like a little slide in the back, and that only goes about 10 feet. So there's no way the concrete would get to the edges of this. So you're gonna have to pay for a pumper to get that stuff where it needs to go. So just want to give you a look at this to see how awesome this stuff is. Okay, so here's the surveyor stake, and that helps assure that you're building in the right place. You see those numbers there? They charge $800 just to put 4 of those. So there's probably about 8. They're in the corners. And if you look around, see there's the neighbor's house. Those stakes are in all the corners of the property. That helps ensure that you're building in the right place so that you don't get into problems with the cities or your neighbors. So these are really, really important. And the lines are down, but usually they have a little line that runs between them. And that shows you where the property line is, where you're supposed to build, etc. You don't want to go outside those lines because it causes a lot of trouble for yourself. So here's what's going to look at these stakes that the surveyors put up, and you absolutely have to follow these. If you don't follow those, it could be a huge disaster. And the contractors know that. And nobody wants trouble. So try to get everything done the way it should be. All right, thank you for listening. And from Los Angeles, California, this is Attaboy Cowboy. Thank you. Bye-bye.